Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's wonderful. I just remembered to change my video background from the last time we recorded, so that's good. We don't look exactly like we did the last show, which is always a nice thing. Try and give the viewers on YouTube a little bit of a different experience, so that's good. I see you haven't changed your background, so good job with that.
Thanks. I am now scrambling for backgrounds. Yes, we just totally forgot to change backgrounds, Tom, but I will get things changed here in a little bit. Don't you worry. And boom, I'm going to go with that one. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. You started talking and I was like, oh, shoot, I saw you change your background. I'm like, oh, I got to do that. And then I stopped listening to you because of the panic. But now I am listening to you, Tom. And fortunately, you have nothing to say. So today, did I cut you off? Go ahead.
On our last show, we talked about people who can, the quarterbacks who can throw when there's not a pass rush in their face, and then just when the game starts, they panic. That's Tony as a podcast host. Like, if he's t-shirt and shorts, he's fine. Like, as soon as the pressure's on, like, oh no, I don't. What's a podcast? What's a football? I don't know what's going on.
The thing is, Tom, I prepare so intently for the show, and so then when any little thing goes off, I have to readjust and I get lost because we are so rigid on this show, and we've got, basically the script is written out word by word. And if you deviate, then I've got to mentally process it. And it takes some time, as you know.
If I had to describe this podcast in two words, rigid and structure would definitely be the two. And that's only because outstanding sonic excellence is more than two words. So I couldn't use that. But yes. Fantastic audio quality, also three words. The only other reason we can't do that, but yes.
Yeah, and Tom, today is a listener question show, and I don't know, about 2 minutes ago, Tom was like, I haven't looked at the questions yet. So again, rigid, structured.
You get my unfiltered, unvarnished opinion on these things. I haven't had time to contemplate lies to appease you. You're just going to get my honest and unfiltered thoughts on all of this stuff. So
fortunately, I have put in plenty of thought to all of this, and I can help you along. I can steer you in the directions where you want to go. So why don't we just go ahead and get started?
All right. From at T Stoics, who would replace Larry Johnson when he finally decides to retire? That would be the Ohio State defensive line coach, obviously. I have a very obvious answer here, and it's one that I've seen other people give as well. But Kenny Anyunike, who was an assistant for Larry Johnson for a number of years, he's now running his own room at Fordham, the Fordham Rams in the FCS level. He seems very much like if you were going to be the next guy, that's what you do. You would sort of be the understudy under Larry Johnson for a couple of years, get all of his experience and internalize that, all of his techniques, all of his coaching, all that kind of stuff. Then go have some experience running your own room, and then you come back and take over whenever Larry Johnson decides to retire. I'm not anticipating this is going to be, it sounds like Larry Johnson has told Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau he's planning to coach for their entire careers. So you got a couple more years. So maybe Kenny Anyunike gets to move up the ladder a little bit. Maybe he goes and works under Jeff Hafley at Boston College, or, somewhere else where you're working in a little bit of a bigger program than Fordham at some point. But ultimately, I think he would be probably my pick to take that job. What about you?
Yeah, I think he's the universal pick because those who have covered the team have seen how closely he and Larry Johnson would work together, and they were basically connected at the hip. And then you go run your own place. He's from, I believe, Central Ohio, if I recall correctly. And so he's got that connection. Went to Duke, if I also recall correctly. And there's no other name really that comes up when people ask this question. He's a pretty young guy. My concern is, is Ohio State really going to want him when he's 60? When Larry Johnson finally retires? And it's like, yeah, I don't know. But, by that point, he will have established himself. But yeah, I think that's, and maybe, Simon, when all of the media people who are asked this question say the same name, like maybe we're missing it. We're too focused on him and missing it. But that's, if there's the fielder, Kenny Anyunike, I don't know anybody would really take the field other than to just be, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. But I think everybody assumes it's going to be Kenny whenever the time comes. And I wouldn't even be surprised if he comes in a year before Larry Johnson retires and is the D-line coach in waiting type of thing if they have a spot for him.
Yeah, and he is, you are correct, he is a native of Lewis Center, Ohio, born in 1990, which I now feel 1,000 years old, which is great. Always what you're looking for. And did go to Duke. You were correct. He played in the NFL for 3 years. He won a Super Bowl with the Broncos. He was there 2014, 2015, won Super Bowl 50 with the Broncos. And then, came back to Ohio State as a grad assistant for 3 years, and then has now been at Fordham. This is his second year at Fordham now. So yeah, he's just young, energetic, has that Larry Johnson DNA now where he spent 3 years working with him. Really nice, likable guy, someone, young enough that I think players are going to relate to him. And, if you're, ideally for Ohio State, Larry Johnson just coaches there forever and never, nothing ever changes. But you're right, like a defensive line coach in waiting kind of thing where, he becomes the assistant defensive line coach or something like that. Like after start working as a grad assistant for a few years, like that would be a very logical transition. Cause at some point, Larry Johnson is not going to be able to tell people, I will definitely be there for your whole career. Like that, this has been something that's been rumored going back to, like, I remember Nick Bosa, that was something that's getting negatively recruited against Larry Johnson that, is, will he be there for your whole career, Nick Bosa? Who's to say? Like, well, okay, he's been there for Nick Bosa and Chase Young and now Zach Harrison and then, Tuamaloau and Jack Sawyer and all those guys. At some point they won't be able to say it, but if he has a succession plan in place and it's like, okay, you'll have me. And then when I leave, then you'll have this guy who has been working closely with me for years, who, I trust he's going to do just a really good job and continue to, and he has my number. If he has questions, he can reach out and call me. Like that's a thing that would be okay too. So that seems like the most logical way for them to handle that situation. Next one from @DNamath11. Why doesn't Ohio State get more former players to coach? Imagine Orlando Pace coaching O-line or Ryan Shazier coaching linebackers or Dante Whitner training DBs. Seem to have worked pretty well at wide receiver. Recruiting would be through the roof. Your thoughts, Tony?
I back in the day, my John Cooper succession plan was he would retire, then Fred Puggett would take over for a couple of years and groom Chris Spielman to eventually take over as Ohio State's head coach. And then that never happened. And then I watched Chris Spielman coach in the Arena League, and he didn't do great. And at that point, the idea that former players should be coaches or were automatically going good coaches, not that it was ever something that was entrenched in my being. I threw that out at that point. Like, just because you're a former player doesn't mean you can coach. The idea that, I've even talked to the Charles Bentley about this, who does training and coaches offensive line. But these are guys who have, money, and they have worked all of their lives to get to this point. The last thing a lot of these guys want to do is get out on the recruiting trail and beg 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds to come to their school. And that was, one of the things, like the Charles Bentley, people come to him, and that works out great for him. Brian Shazier, Orlando, you think Orlando Pace, Hall of Famer, he doesn't. Orlando, we need you to, head down to, there's a kid in Arkansas. I know we don't do well in Arkansas, but we want to make sure we're covering our bases. And so then, he's like, did I really? Because this is a guy who would skip training camp because he just didn't want to, he would hold out or whatever, or I got an ankle. So the idea that you can just plug these guys in and they're great at coaching. For one, they may not want to do all of the recruiting. And I completely understand that. Two, they may not be coaching material. JT Barrett, who Urban Meyer wanted to get into coaching. I remember JT saying one time, like, I don't want to have a job where I have to hit the alarm in the morning, that sort of thing. And he may eventually come to coaching, but it's not something that he was interested in college. Brian Hartline wasn't interested in coaching until Bobby Carpenter said, no, come on by and just work out scout team stuff for the bowl game. And then boom, it clicked with him. Like, this might be something I didn't know I wanted to do it. This was fun. I can help. And then he said it became a calling for him. And so it's rare to have a calling, if you will. And it's also rare that former superstar players are good coaches. Cause I don't Tom, there's not a lot. We saw Pepper Johnson recently took over IMG, and so I have to go back to a guy who played 1983 to give another example of and Mike Vrabel did it, but clearly he wanted to get out of college coaching as quickly as he could because it's a grind, and it's a different type of grind. It's not a grind where in the NFL it's just the same. Where in college you're like, I have to do the coaching and I also have to do the recruiting, and it's a lot of takes a lot of patience, and coaching and patience don't always go together.
No, I mean there's just a ton of time and there's a ton of travel involved and there's a ton, I mean you don't have holidays, you don't have you don't have weekends, you don't really have an off season. It's just I saw Shelley Meyer had a tweet sometime last weekend that was basically college coaches only get married in January if you don't go to a bowl game, and July. That's it. Like that's the time of year that you have college football coaches, they actually have some time off and can actually do things like get married, hang out with their kids, go on vacation. Like everyone goes on vacation in July because that's the only time you can go on vacation, because otherwise you're in the middle of the season or you're recruiting or you got all the other stuff going on. It's just, it is absolutely a grind. And so you have to find, the person who meets in the middle of the Venn diagram of, famous enough that the name means something, which means they probably made a whole bunch of money in the NFL, which means that they don't, they're not doing this for the money. They're doing this for the pure love of the game and wanting to do it. And, they have a family who's like, oh yeah, absolutely. Go by all means, follow your passion. We don't need to see you. Like if you had $50 million, would you do would you take on a job where it's like, okay, now I'm going to leave and I'm going to be gone constantly. I'm going to have to be on the phone. I'm going to have no days off. I'm going to have to constantly be texting high school kids all the time. Like there are not that many people who are going to feel compelled to do that, when the other choice is like, well, I could also just go play golf every day and then go play golf every morning and then go hang out with my kids in the afternoon and go see my kid play. Orlando Pace has a son that's going to be a walk-on at Ohio State this fall, Jalen Pace. Guess what Orlando Pace got to do the last few years? Watch his kid play high school football. That's like a thing you can do. That was something that last fall you saw a lot of Ohio State coaches at their kids' high school games, and it was like this rare treat because normally they would be out scouting someone. They're watching someone else's kid play high school football because they're and they're not watching their own kid. So yeah, that's just a very difficult thing. And there are programs that have done the pick a lot of former players thing, and sometimes it doesn't work out great. Like Arizona State has a lot of former football players on their staff, and that's like not going super fantastic for Arizona State right now. You do have some celebrity coaches, the FCS level. Deion Sanders is at Jackson State now. Eddie George is at Tennessee State now. Right now, let's see how those go. Eddie George is doing, both of them are kind of doing the lots of former players on the staff thing. Let's see where that is 2-3 years from now. Maybe it works out great. Maybe these guys decide like, you know what? Turns out this is a lot of work, and I have, I could also just go play golf and hang out with my kids. That is a thing that some of them will probably decide to do. But, Brian Hartline is, I think, the exception rather than the rule there.
Yeah, and a very good exception.
Next one from at TJ&G. Who currently on the roster is most likely to benefit from NIL and why? To me, I mean, you're looking at immediately, it's the established guys. It's the Chris Olaves, maybe Garrett Wilson, guys like that who have a few years of experience, big name, want to do that, want to go, have a pretty big following on social media, have a good established brand. Like, I mean, just think about Chris Olave. Like, how many times have you heard someone say something negative about Chris Olave? Like going back to the first time we really talked to Chris Olave in 2018, we had this true freshman brought out to us for interviews, and it was just because they're just talking about the fact that, this guy just does everything right. He does everything right in practice all the time. We talked to him before he did anything really on the field, because he was like this like shining star example of doing absolutely everything right. And I remember people giving us grief, like, why are you writing about this jerk, this kid? Like, he hasn't done anything yet. Why are you wasting time with this? We're going to hear about the backup water boy next. And then a couple of weeks later, it's like, oh, it turns out he's pretty good. Oh, he scored 2 touchdowns against Michigan in the first half. Like, oh, okay. Again, this is like Brian Hartline. That's the exception, not the rule. Chris Olave has had multiple years of, doing everything the right way, being extremely well liked within the program, being extremely popular with Ohio State fans off the field. That's the kind of person that's going to benefit, I think, a lot from this. I think next year we can have the conversation about how much will Quinn Ewers benefit from NIL. That's a whole different conversation where you have that, the hype build up and all that kind of stuff. JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, someone like that could explode, and be a big name person. But ultimately, I think it's like 5-star quarterback, whether it's CJ Stroud or Kyle McCord or Quinn Ewers next year, like those are the kind of guys who you're going to have a lot. But of the current team, I think Chris Olave might be my answer, at least for this year.
I had completely forgotten about that whole Olave thing when, because the thing is at Ohio State, the media, they're bringing players out. The media, all of the media gets to talk to the same people, same answers, same questions. And so then once you talk to somebody, you go write about it. And so there was, 5 or 6 outlets or whatever that wrote about Olave, and people were just, who, what, why? And then, you eventually see it and you kind of go, I think we may have gone back to a few of those people who tweeted at us and been like, remember, this is why, and congratulations. This just, I had completely forgotten about that. That was a good time, Tom. Thanks for reminding me of that one.
Are you suggesting that we might be slightly petty and vindictive about people who tell us we're idiots on social media? I mean, listen, I don't want to say that last weekend I tweeted out that I was going to spend the next 15 minutes after the JT Tuimoloau stuff was all up, just responding to everyone on YouTube who had called us idiots for suggesting that he was definitely going to Ohio State with just sup. I thought about it. I didn't do it, but I thought about it. I'm not going to lie. I definitely thought about it.
No, I would never say we're slightly petty. I think we talked about this in the last listener question show that Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are probably the top 2. What about somebody like Kyle McCord, whoever the backup quarterback is, say the week after the starter struggles, and then boom, the backup is automatically the most popular guy on campus. Like, do you cash in at that point and you could be like, hi, I'm Kyle McCord. You might remember me from such things as everybody wanting me to come into the game last week. And now here I am for Midas. And boy, you should get a muffler at Midas.
I'm Kyle McCord for AAA. Ever have something fail? And, I'm standing by waiting to help out as something fails in front of you. Like, yeah, I could see that. That seems like a natural fit. The tricky thing is, they have that like 2-week waiting period in the Ohio law. So you'd have to have 3 bad weeks. And then by the time, if it's 3 bad weeks, then he stepped in and then everyone's seen like, well, this guy occasionally throws incomplete passes too. Well, all right. Well, who else? Who's the emergency? Okay. Jack Miller. All right. Hurry up. So you've got to plan ahead. Jack Miller's got to think ahead and be ready to jump on that as soon as anticipate the failure of others. That's the thing, and be ready to cash in. That's the key to every good team.
Yeah, and if Michigan has the same law, the problem is the companies being as up to speed, because Alan Bowman could certainly start recording now, like doing commercials now, because eventually he'll be coming in. But the companies don't necessarily know that unless, of course, they listen to us, and which, of course, what am I saying? Of course they do. And
I'm Alan Bowman. When September ends and your quarterbacks start falling apart, there you go. Hey, speaking of quarterbacks, from @Tony_Lisa13, is there a clear path for Kyle McCord to succeed at Ohio State? If Stroud is the probable starter, Ewers sits for 1 year tops. How does McCord fit? And I think there's an assumption built into this question that I don't know if I necessarily buy 100%, which is Ewers sits for 1 year tops. So, right. If Quinn Ewers is not the best quarterback in 2023, then Quinn Ewers is not the starting quarterback in 2023. I think the presumption in this question is CJ Stroud starts this year. CJ Stroud starts in 2022. CJ Stroud is healthy the whole time, and then CJ Stroud goes off to the NFL. All entirely possible. CJ Stroud might not be NFL ready after 3 years. That's a possibility too. CJ Stroud could be the starter this fall and then get hurt, and then Kyle McCord or Jack Miller steps in and they do a great job and win the job, and then when Ohio State goes to Virginia Tech next year, everyone's standing on the sideline, not sure who the quarterback is. I mean, there's a million different ways this could all play out. But there is a clear path for Kyle McCord to succeed at Ohio State. I mean, it is if you do have CJ Stroud, quarterback for the next 2 years, as this question sort of presumes, 2021, 2022, spring camp 2023. Kyle McCord has been there for a couple of years. He's got a year, an additional year of experience over Quinn Ewers. It's entirely possible he wins that job at that point. And, there's a million different ways this could change. If CJ Stroud gets hurt in week 1 this year, and Kyle McCord's the next guy up, well, then Kyle McCord is potentially has a full year of starting experience coming out of this year. And then he has an extremely clear path to the field at the start of next year. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways that could play out. But, I think everyone feels like they have this like very, you make these plans like, oh, well, this is certainly like very neatly. He'll play 2 years, and then Kyle McCord will play 1 year, and then he'll go to the NFL, and then Quinn Ewers will play 1 year, and then he'll go to the NFL. And it's like, well, what are the odds that it all works out exactly like that? Probably not that great.
Well, and I have a couple times I've charted like, how can everybody play? I keep coming down to, you might only get 2 years total out of Kyle McCord and Quinn Ewers starting. Because if you figure, let's say CJ Stroud starts this year, he'll start next year, leave for the NFL after his redshirt sophomore year. So then in 2023, it's a redshirt sophomore Kyle McCord or a redshirt freshman Quinn Ewers. I go with McCord, and then does he leave after 1 year of starting? Then you've got Quinn Ewers as a redshirt sophomore in 2024, where he would have had to sit, and then he comes in 2024 and starts. Does he leave after 1 year starting as a redshirt sophomore? Ohio State could have 3 straight years, 2022, 2023, 2024, where redshirt sophomore starts and then leaves. Mm-hmm. And we saw how that almost hurt Ohio State with Dwayne Haskins. They were able to overcome that by getting Justin Fields to transfer over. So that's to be able to only get like 4 years of starting out of CJ Stroud, Kyle McCord, Quinn Ewers. It sounds like the worst possible outcome, but it also might be the most likely unless McCord or Ewers stays longer than 3 years. And then in 2025, you've got 6th year Jack Miller. If you want to get everybody into this, a way that everybody could start, 2025 Jack Miller could, I guess, go ahead and get into the mix as well. Not that he isn't now, but it's there's no clear path for anybody other than the guy who ends up starting this year.
Right. I mean, you want a clear path to the starting job. It's JJ McCarthy at Michigan, because there's like Cade McNamara, who's like, eh, and Alan Bowman, who you mentioned, who is a transfer from Texas Tech, who is like, eh, and Dan Villari, who is probably not going to start there. And it's like, well, if you have a clear path to the starting job, it's because there's like the one guy who's, head and shoulders above everyone else. Ohio State has been bringing in like really elite, like you don't normally bring in 3 5-star quarterbacks in a row in 3 consecutive classes, and Ohio State's doing that. And this is a little bit like the cornerback recruiting we talked about on the last show. It's like, well, you just keep bringing these guys in, and like it's going to work itself out, and someone is probably going to transfer at some point. This is why you're going to have this guy for 1 year, and then this guy for 1 year, and then this guy for 1 year. Like that's just not how it's going to work. Someone is going to be third string and get annoyed the fact that they're third string and leave, because 5-star quarterbacks don't necessarily come in expecting to be 5th string. They're not all necessarily going to be patient enough to go, well, I'm better off learning under Ryan Day for a year and then waiting another year. Like sometimes guys just come in and they want to play. And, if you come in and you're seeing someone else in your class who is a 5-star quarterback starting right away, and you're being told like you got to wait a year or two, like maybe that's not going to work for someone's timetable. So there's just a lot of moving parts here. But if you have a room full of quarterbacks who are 5-star recruits and you're developing them well, like ultimately that's better than having a clear-cut guy like JJ McCarthy, where it's like, what is the path to JJ McCarthy not being the starter at Michigan in 2022, 2023? It's just, it's very unlikely, right? So you would much rather have the thing where it's like, well, we have too many talented quarterbacks to play all at the same time, so we'll have to figure it out. And whether that is someone leaving or someone just waiting their turn, like that's fine, but you can file that under good problems to have for a college football program.
I had a thought on this, Tom, but you took a long time getting to wrap up there, so I had forgotten it. But I will, if I remember it, I will bring it back up. It was a good thought too. It's a shame,
man. The first one in program history, and we wasted it. I'm so sorry. I'm I apologize. I'll be brief from now on. Next one from @Dan Broidy. Do teams ever send committed players to other schools to spy?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Did Maurice Claret go to visit Michigan like officially in 2001 because he wanted to watch the Ohio State game? Somebody did that. I don't know if it was, maybe it was Beanie Wells. Maybe I seem to recall that. I don't know that players go to other places to spy, but they certainly go to other places knowing they're going to commit to somewhere else just in order to watch games. And we've seen that where I forget, one of the top guys in maybe 2022 or 2023 who was an Ohio State lean, or that I think Mark was asking him, hey, what games are you going to go see? And maybe it was Hero Canoe was saying, well, I want to see the Ohio State Oregon game and I want to see the Ohio State Michigan game. And like, he's going to have to go to Michigan to see that one. But the fact that he's, and I don't know if it was Hero Canoe, I can't remember if it was or not, but the common denominator there was Ohio State. And I don't think there's spying going on, but I also know there have been players who visit either officially, unofficially, or during camps who recruit for another school while they're on the campus of another school. So I guess, Tom, is that's spying. They're certainly not going there, and the coaches aren't telling them not to do it. Like, hey, if you see guys there, don't tell them about how good our school is. That's not what's going on. They send them there and say, hey, don't forget to put in a good word.
Yeah, and I mean, I think spying here sort of presumes like you're going to be stealing intel or creating hey, I've got this coach on a wire, offering me $10,000 or something like that. Like that's stuff like that can happen. I mean, the Ole Miss and Mississippi State had a bunch of stuff where you had guys getting recruited by both schools and trying to trap people or whatever. I mean that crazy stuff does happen. But you're right. I mean, you do more often than not. It's guy who's interested in one school goes and visits while that school is playing another school, or guy who's committed goes and spends the weekend telling the guys at this guy from Ohio State, hypothetically, we'll just pick examples. Guy from Ohio State goes to Oklahoma on an Oklahoma recruiting weekend and spends a lot of time talking to the guys who are also interested in Ohio State about how great Ohio State is. Like that's a thing that you can have happen sometimes in recruiting as well. So yeah, I mean, it's not like spying, like you're going to sneak out of the building with a playbook or anything like that. But you do have people who go on visits for reasons other than purely just, I am genuinely interested in this school and would be interested in learning more about furthering my academic and football career here. So yeah, the answer is sort of, but not exactly in the way that the question may have sort of presumed.
Tom, let me stop you before you get to that next one, because I remembered my good thought. The idea of a clear path for success for Kyle Mccord to succeed at Ohio State. How do we measure success? I would argue Joe Burrow succeeded at Ohio State because he learned a great deal. He got a degree. He didn't start, but it allowed him to go somewhere else and start. Am I being too lenient in considering it? It's not a success for Ohio State. I think it was a success for Joe Burrow, though.
Yeah, and I think the question is, it's not how do you set yourself up for success at Ohio State? The question is, how do you set yourself up for success as a college football player and ultimately then as an NFL player? And unquestionably, that worked out just fine for Joe Burrow. Tate Martell, that didn't work out for. Like there's differences between them personality wise and height wise and everything else. So there's reasons that these things kind of can shake out in different ways. But it's pretty unquestionable that a few years working under Ryan Day, who is now pretty universally acknowledged as one of the best quarterback coaches in the country, a couple of years working under him, even if you end up going somewhere else, that's only going to help you. That's only going, if you're getting better instruction at Ohio State and then you go somewhere else, you're further along than you would have been otherwise. Corey Curtis, who was a walk-on a couple of years ago, came to Ohio State, was a walk-on at Ohio State for a couple of years, is sitting in those film sessions with Ryan Day, learning from Ryan Day, getting his technique changed by Ryan, tweaked by Ryan Day, whatever. Then he goes and he's a quarterback at the FCS level, transfers. Like same thing with like Zaid Hamden. Zaid Hamden is a defensive lineman, spent 3 years under Larry Johnson, then transferred to James Madison. He still, he leaves with all the knowledge that Larry Johnson has imparted. Larry Johnson, who is universally regarded as one of the most elite defensive line coaches in the country. Zaid Hamden is a better college football player now because of that time under Larry Johnson than he probably would have been had he gone, somewhere else. So yeah, that's absolutely, I think the question, it's just about framing that question. It's how do you set yourself up for a successful college football career and potentially NFL career beyond that. So next one from @zmoney87_. Thoughts on Kevin Warren. And this could be a whole different show, but I think Kevin Warren could both. You have kind of two different sides to this. The one side that is Kevin Warren's defense is Kevin Warren is not the one who is casting the vote on all the stuff that was probably not decided correctly in the year of 2020. The decision to cancel when they decided to cancel, the hesitance to come back, all of that was university presidents and chancellors who had those votes. So that was not Kevin Warren solely decreeing we shall not play football this year. Now, that being said, Kevin Warren did not handle the messaging surrounding that particularly well. Kevin Warren probably, he probably could have guided those conversations. He did, did he guide those conversations in a certain direction that led to that vote? You had different conferences all run by university presidents, and you had different conferences vote to play versus not play. Were certain conference commissioners sort of directing those conversations in a way that maybe led more people to be willing to play than others? There's a bunch of that stuff. And then the messaging around it, like that August, 11th or whatever day that was last year, where he went on Big Ten Network and just like couldn't explain anything. And it was just like, I'm sorry, you just made one of the most significant decisions in the history of the sport. And you can't exactly tell us why. You can't exactly tell us what the vote was. You can't exactly tell us like the thinking behind the process. It was just too much uncertainty. Like, okay, well, why did you not delay it, kick the can, and, give yourself an opportunity if that uncertainty resolves itself in 2 to 4 to 6 weeks to be able to just kind of get back going. Like it was like, no. This is a final decision, will not be revisited, too much uncertainty. Like, well, and then it turned out they probably should have handled it the other way. They should have handled it the way that the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 did. So he is both a convenient punching bag, probably a little bit more so than is fair, but also didn't handle it well at all, probably, in the process and how the Big Ten really made that decision.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add other than because I don't want to pile on the guy, Tom. I think you're being a little rough. Big Ten played last year. It's not like they didn't. So let's give him some credit, right? He came up with a great schedule and had the built-in bye weeks. That he was part of that. Now, did they cancel the schedule in the season 5 days later? Yes, but that's not what we're here to talk about because they did end up playing, Tom. So let's remember that. Did they play? Yes, they played.
Did they cancel the season based on a really not particularly well-sourced, rather speculative report on myocarditis that turned out to probably not really be accurate at all and was probably a decision that was dramatically rushed into? Like, well, they did play later, so.
Thank you. I accept your apology. And yeah, I don't really have much more to add. It was, I want to say it was an impossible situation for a first-year commissioner. But I was going to say it's kind of like a true freshman, but he wasn't. He was a redshirt freshman. He sat with Jim Delaney his entire first year, basically. They announced the hire, they announced the replacement in June of 2019. And so he sat at the right hand of Jim Delaney for a year, learning and following. And I don't know if then he just believed that he became Jim Delaney and that like one of the most powerful men in sports and didn't need to include everybody else, the SEC and the ACC and Pac-12 and his thoughts, and just the lack of communication down was bad. The lack of down to the coaches and the players and the programs was bad. Lack of communication outward to the other conferences was bad, and I can't put that on just the presidents of the universities because ultimately he speaks for them. And if you're not speaking, then what are you doing?
Right. And if you're not communicating with the other conferences, if you are, again, this is, you touched on it there. This is his first year in charge. There were a number of first year university presidents. This is I think everyone probably needed to be shown a little bit of grace at the beginning of this process, and everyone was sort of figuring it out together. But there was the same data that everyone had in early August, and several conferences made what turned out to be the right call, and the Big Ten and Pac-12 made what turned out to be the wrong call. Like, you're gonna, you've got that nice office, you've got that nice paycheck. Like, there's going to be some accountability there as part of that nice job in that nice office. You want that nice paycheck. You're going to be held accountable when you make decisions that were probably made rashly, probably unnecessarily, to the degree that the decision was made at the time the decision was made. You gotta, that ultimately does, the buck does in fact stop there.
You say he has a nice office. Let's remember, he was working from home. He was not in his office. He was in his home office, as we saw. So, you got to give him that. He's not in Chicago, where things get run smoothly. He's in another country, practically in Minnesota.
That's true. Not nearly as much proximity to a Brazilian steakhouse at home. So you do need to show him a little grace there. Next one from @RickSchimpf. Any thoughts on who might be captains? I know you went through and did this, so I'll let you handle that.
Well, the last 2 years there have been 7 captains, so we'll assume that is the case this year. I put in I think 9 names here. Tom, tell me the 7. I went Chris Olave,
yes.
Garrett Wilson,
yes,
Thayer Munford,
yes,
Nicholas Petit-Frere.
He's
a quiet guy, but he's also respected. And
he is. I think you're going to have one guy on the offensive line, and I think Thayer Munford might be the guy over Nick Petit-Frere. Okay. I don't have an issue with Nick Petit-Frere being a captain. It's not unthinkable that he would, but I think you're going to have one lineman, and it's probably Munford. But go ahead. Okay.
Jeremy Ruckert.
Yeah, quite possible. Yep.
Taraja Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
Haskell Garrett.
Definitely yes.
Mm-hmm. Tyreek Smith.
Yeah.
Dallas Gant, middle linebacker, well respected.
Yeah. I mean, you're probably doing one of the linebackers, probably, but yeah.
So take out one offensive lineman and one linebacker. You got your 7.
Yeah, and does the quarterback end up being a captain? I mean, we've had
Justin
that conversation.
Fields wasn't.
Justin Fields wasn't. That's true.
Until maybe last year.
That was his first year in the program. So CJ Stroud has been there. So is it CJ Stroud? I don't necessarily expect it. Did you say Master Teague?
No, and that was another one.
He's another one that's a possibility. Sevyn Banks is a possibility. You probably want someone in the defensive back room. I think you've got
Marcus Williamson.
Maybe Marcus Williamson,
5th-year guy.
Yeah, I mean he's a possibility. Cam Babb, if he was healthy, I think Cam Babb is a possibility, and maybe he still is. Maybe he's still in that conversation. But then you've got 3 wide receivers, so maybe not. I mean, there's all sorts of there's not a shortage of high quality veteran individuals on this team that you would consider making captains. So it's just kind of a matter of finding the balance of the right groups of different groups of players and that kind of stuff, but different positions and all of that. But yeah, I mean, I don't. There was no one on that list that you just ran through that I went, oh no, definitely not. There's the people who, if you would kind of go, yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen, is more positional balance in that, because you don't want to have four wide receivers and no offensive linemen or quarterbacks or running backs. You want to have a leader in each room, kind of. So
the 2 definites would be Thayer and Haskell Garrett, and then
those are I think the two, and Chris Olave. I would say. I mean, Chris Olave I think is a pretty certain thing too. So. Yeah, that's a pretty good list. And when do they do captains? That's kind of middle of fall camp, right?
Yes.
It feels like they didn't do anything on a normal schedule last year, so I'm all thrown off.
Yeah, and if I Google Ohio State names captains 2019, it tells me August 19th.
There you go, so, middle of fall camp. Good. Good news. I remember how things work. Fantastic. Good. We can officially have a football season. Last question from Jack STR 720814007. Seeing that Tom can see the future, thank you, or maybe you're welcome. Maybe you and Marty McFly can tell us which Ohio State team will be the best over the next 3 years. Now, I have an opinion on this. I don't know if I want to spoil this for everyone. So, do you want to have you share your more uninformed opinion, or should I just spoil the surprise right now?
Well, should I give my thoughts and then you'd be like, and just like interject with your doubts.
Remember the old Saturday Night Live McLaughlin report? You start talking wrong. Yes. I think it's 2022. You got this year. You've got some questions. You've got defensive backfield's a little bit of a question. You got a new starting quarterback. Like, yeah, I mean, this is going to be a very good team. This is a national title contender team. This is a team that I expect to be in the college football playoff this year. Legitimate national title contender team. I'm not saying this is a terrible, deeply flawed team. There's some questions this year. 2022, you've got the returning starting quarterback. Your concern is the tackles, and you're going to lose Thayer Munford, so there's one tackle spot. Does Nick Petite come back? I mean, everyone has kind of like written him off. I don't think it's as likely that he leaves as people think. I'm not saying he's not going to leave, but I think there are a lot of people who think like, yeah, he's like 80% likely to go. It's like, I don't know if that's true. So if you have him back and then you have Paris Johnson, you got DeJuan Jones, you got some options there at the tackle spot. I would certainly assume that Paris Johnson probably wins that job and DeJuan Jones maybe kicks inside to guard, but you've got some options there. The running back position is still loaded. The wide receiver position is still loaded. You got to replace Jeremy Ruckert at tight end, but I mean, you're really, again, like you're in pretty good shape there.
You just glossed over Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Like, yeah.
It turns out Brian Hartline's been recruiting pretty well. I don't know if you've been keeping up on these things, but Brian Hartline's been recruiting pretty well. You got Jackson Smith and Jigba back as and all of these guys who have been like 5-star wide receivers, top 50 wide receivers, like they don't need all of them to pan out. They just need like 3 or 4 of them to pan out. And the odds that Brian Hartline's going to convert, 9 top 50 wide receivers into like 4 or 5 good playable wide receivers, like I'm probably going to take that bet that probably does happen. You got to replace Jeremy Ruckert at tight end. You got to replace, Haskell Garrett on the inside of the defensive line, potentially Teron Vincent on the inside of the defensive line. If he goes, that's a possibility. Linebacker is kind of a question. I mean, there's a lot to sort out at linebacker because you got all those guys who could potentially play one season and go. Corner, with Sevyn Banks gone this year, but you've got, you're starting to catch up with, you're getting the bubble there where they've had this like hole, the donut hole in their cornerback room. That's starting to age up, and some of the younger guys, that 2020 class where they brought in like 6 guys, and then the 2021 class where they're bringing in a bunch of guys, like those guys are starting to turn, get veteran enough that they can really be, contributors. You still have an Australian punter. I mean, I think there's a lot to like about the 2022 class. And then 2023, again, if you're assuming that CJ Stroud is the guy this year and CJ Stroud is the guy next year, and then CJ Stroud leaves and you get a new starting quarterback in 2023. And if it's Kyle McCord / Quinn Ewers, you're probably in reasonably good hands, but you got a new starting quarterback, which is always a little bit of a concern. So, yeah, I mean, I think you've got, your holes that you're trying to paper over in 2022, there are more obvious answers to than I think the holes in 2021. And then 2023, like you're pretty far out. I feel like I have a great feel for that one, but yeah, I think 2022 is the answer. Go ahead and tell me I'm right.
If I know who the starting left tackle is in 2023, I might go with 2023, but I still, like you said, it's far out. It's question marks. It could be looking at a new quarterback. I think 2022, what you'll also have is some of these seniors that could leave or could come back will come back. Whether it's Tyreek Smith or is it Nicholas Petite Frere, you'll get some of these guys that come back for that 5th year that wouldn't have necessarily had that. Even Zach Harrison coming back for a 4th year. I think there's going to be some of that will bolster the 2022 team, and so there's more known about the 2022 squad. But I also wouldn't be surprised if 2021 ends up in the playoffs again and looking really good, but the secondary is such a concern. And 2023, I would we should almost look at this compartmentally, like which will be better in 2022 and 2023. And we kind of did that last week with the recruiting classes of 2021 and 2022, but I'll take the secondary from 2023 over the secondary from 2022. And, I think the quarterbacks will be fine. Travion Henderson's going to be in his 3rd year in 2023. I bet he's going to be pretty good. And, but it's so lame to just be like, well, but who's going to be the left tackle? And that's I guess where I keep going back to in 2023. But I don't think it's. I think 2022 is the more sure bet, but I won't be surprised by the time 2023 rolls around that's the right answer.
Well, and I think it's fairly instructive that you're looking potentially 3 seasons out, 2023, and it's like, what are the questions? Like, well, which of the 5-star quarterbacks is going to be the actual starting quarterback? Who's going to play left tackle if Paris Johnson leaves after 3 years? I mean, like, there are probably 120 something teams that have far more questions for 2021 than Ohio State does for 2023. That's sort of where that's sort of the subtext of this whole conversation and this whole answer. So, over under playoff appearances 2021 to 2023. 2.5. And I will remind you that it's entirely possible that 2023 will be the 12-team playoff at that point. So you're basically in almost automatically most years.
Yeah. I mean, you have to go the over on that. Like, you're not going to, who's going to stop them is the other question. And
right. Yeah. 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 I mean, because if you're missing this year, okay, what's the path to them missing this year? They probably have to lose to Oregon and then lose another Big Ten game somewhere. Do they lose did they lose home for Penn State? Do they lose
Big Ten championship game?
Big Ten championship game. I mean, it's possible that's the path, but I mean, they're favored by 10 plus points in every game this year. So you have to lose multiple games so you're favored by double digits. I mean, it can happen. This is not an absolute given, but they're better than 50-50 to make the playoff this year. They're probably better than 50-50 to make the playoff next year, 2023, if it does expand to a 12-team playoff. And I think there's every reason to think that, the NCAA and the people who run college football are going to want to get that nice, shiny new TV check in as soon as humanly possible. So I don't expect them to kick the can down to 2026 on that. So, and then at that point, like, is 2018 the last time Ohio State misses the playoff for the span of 8 to 10 years? Like, that's entirely possible at that point.
Yep. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add, but I do think if you're going to tell me Paris Johnson is around in 2023, I would probably take 2023 because of the recruiting classes of 2021 and 2020 and also 2022. But since I don't know that yet, I'm going to abstain. So it was
Tony Gerdeman, profiles and courage. Go.
Yes. I mean, it was addressed to you. The question was
that's true. That's true.
Me. I probably shouldn't have even been talking.
Maybe you and Marty McFly can tell us. It was addressed to both of us.
Dang it. All right, Tom, you got anything else? I think that's going to end the show, whether you want it to or not. I'm kind of angry.
I've been told I talk too much, so I'm gonna talk less. So I don't want you to forget how to do the end of the show. So I'm just gonna stop talking right now.
I should just turn it off right now. Like, yes, he did forget how to do it. No, I have not forgotten, Tom. Thank you guys for listening, and thank you for watching. Tom, you had something to say.
Thank you for listening to Across the Field. Nope, that's not it. That's not, no. Oh, what is it?
No, all right, that will do it, though. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for watching. Reminder to check out BuckeyeScoop.com, YouTube.com/BuckeyeScoop. Become a member. Check out the Ask the Insiders board. There's a ton of stuff there. And subscribe. Google Podcast. We're there. Spotify, all of our podcasts. If you just search Buckeye Scoop in whatever platform you listen to, you'll get a litany of stuff. Mark Givler and Bill Green are getting back on the Gives in the Bank train there, so they're going to be cranking that out. Tom, honestly, they need to update their Scoop 100. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, they just did this long methodical assessment of players, hundreds of players from across the country to put their ranking in, and now it's well, they've had a month worth of camps. I think everything needs to be scrapped and redone from scratch. I'm not sure. They may respectfully disagree on that and reevaluate after they have a full season of high school football. But
I would do it.
I don't have to. Well, yes, we know what a stickler you are for hard work and consistency, and So, but I would suspect we'll get an update sometime this fall, maybe mid-season, end of season kind of thing. But I don't think I'm going to question Mark and Bill's work ethic, unlike some people on this podcast.
All right, we better end there while I'm still employed. So talk to you guys later. Have a good one.